Maria Zolkina there. Thank you. Now, Russia is the most sanctioned country in the world, and yet this year its economy is set to grow faster than all advanced economies. That's according to the International Monetary Fund. Russian President Vladimir Putin is due to address an international economic forum in St. Petersburg in the next hour or so. And while the focus will be on the economy, there will, of course, be a lot of geopolitical discussions around the war in Ukraine. Let's speak now to Professor of Russian Politics at King's College London, Samuel Greene. Hello to you. And hi,
Hello.
Can you just explain to us then how Russia is managing this 3.2% economic growth despite these sanctions?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of elements to the answer to that question. One, of course, is oil, and the West has really tried to walk a fine line between, as the U.S. has put it, putting sand in the gears of the Russian war machine, but also not putting too much sand in the gears of the Western economies, which are themselves dependent on oil prices, and so wanted to reduce the income to Russia, which has probably happened to some degree, but clearly not enough to really stall the Russian economy, while maintaining price stability in the West. So that continues to be an issue. The other is that really this war is mission critical for Putin. And so he has taken the wherewithal that the Russian government has and plowed it directly into military industrial production. Most of that growth, one way or another, is coming from spending on the war, from building tanks, making shells, paying soldiers, really putting the entirety of the Russian economy on a war footing. That, creates a short-term boost. It's not without costs, right? The Russian economy is running very hot. The bankers and the central bank are very concerned about that. We're expecting rate rises maybe as early as today on the central bank's prime interest rates. And there are problems in the Russian economy. It will not grow that fast next year. And frankly, given what's going on with global commodity prices, oil prices, it would have been growing at a much faster clip this year if it wasn't subject to these sanctions.
OK, and I suppose it has created a sort of dependence on China, hasn't it, this?
Well, it certainly created a relationship in which Russia would not be able to do what it's doing without the Chinese market as an export market, and without China's ability to replace some of the goods and technology, and to a certain extent the finance that Russia had used to get from its relations with Europe in particular. But it's not a perfect substitute. Russia doesn't produce everything that, for example, German industry produces. Sorry, China doesn't produce it. China cannot invest in the Russian economy, doesn't want to invest in the Russian economy the way that Europe did. It cannot buy natural gas and oil the way that Europe did, and at the prices that Europe did. So it impoverishes Russia in the medium to the long run, but it does give Russia the wherewithal that it needs to keep fighting, at least for the time being.
OK, and just briefly, this forum obviously is probably Putin trying to show that some areas of the world do very much want to deal with Russia and putting on a good show, I suppose. He's expected to talk for about 3 hours, I understand. In terms of the sort of how that will go down in Russia, how much it's believed by people in Russia, what do you think?
Well, I think that really is the key question. If you look around Russian business, not necessarily the parts of Russian business that are owned by the state, but the enterprises that are still privately owned, they are very much operating, I think, in the hopes that somehow Russia will return to business as usual at some point. They're trying to ignore the war as much as possible. And I think it's very important for Putin to try to communicate to them that, there is a safe space for them, that he is trying to retain something of a market economy without the state interfering really in every aspect of economic production. I think that's increasingly a very difficult line to maintain. But he may want to try to make this forum a little bit, at least, of a war-free zone, while trying to show that Russian business has options, even if it can't interact with Europe and the United States the way it used to. It can interact with the Persian Gulf, with the Pacific Rim. I think very few Russian entrepreneurs will be interested in doing business with North Korea, frankly.
OK, well, thank you so much for talking to us. That's Samuel Greene from King's College London.